City or are you Detroit City? Anyway, we're here with Donnie. We're talking Ironjawz. You have a new book. You have an errata. Donnie has gone 5-0 at a bunch of events, including recently Michigan GT, which was a solid attendance rate. And I want to get into Donnie's head and find out how he's thinking about this book. It's the third edition book. It's a sweet book, by the way. I really like it. It's a good book. Bit sad that you lost prayers from the Bone Splitter sides, but this is not the Bone Splitter show. I'm sure you would have loved Curse or something, but we're here to talk Ironjawz.
Let's get the WA on, right?
Get in the WA. But before we kickstart, I thought maybe introduce yourself a little bit. So you are from Detroit. You are very well known. You got the awesome shirt. We were saying earlier that Brad and the Games Club would not let you down if you weren't wearing the Detroit. Yeah, there it is. Represent. You guys are a super competitive club. I will get you on the channel as a group at one stage. But for anyone who doesn't know who you are, do you want to let people know, other than your humble flex of 5-0s?
Humble flex of 5-0s, yeah. Really just playing in the Midwest scene out here. Attended quite a few events like what was it? Depticon, went up to Wapaka, Holy Hammers or Holy Wars, Circle City, Midwest Meltdown, Michigan GT. So try to do some of those different things. Been playing the game since back in like 6th edition, so quite a while back, like old fantasy style, all the square bases and stuff like that. So and then transformed into AOS and whatnot, and been loving it since. And I think the game's in a really great spot where it's at, and just kind of ready to get going with it. So, and keep cracking on this 3-0 stuff. So
no, I absolutely love it. We were just talking a little bit earlier, the fact that my world had recently kind of stopped and yours kind of stopped, at the end of 2E. You've come in, you've absolutely had some banger results. And I've been dying to have this discussion. I've been waiting. The FAQ seemed to take 10 years. I don't know why it took a million years to get the FAQ. But boy, oh boy, you guys got it good. I think, I remember seeing this book for the first time. I'm going through the reviews, and first off, I thought Ironjawz were a big winner. I didn't think that there was a lot of bad stuff in the book, unlike like Bone Splitters, which I think lost a few things. And I know there are some passionate Bone Splitters players out there that, they're like, yeah, our piggies are now good. But Ironjawz, I thought, come off pretty well with this new book. What was your initial take?
No, I really liked it. I really didn't think they really lost really much. A few mount traits, a few artifacts and stuff like that, some command abilities or command traits, but really with the way that they did the mega bosses and stuff like that, with the being able to do the spam the command abilities and stuff like that, and then that before at Michigan GT we played it pre FAQ, so it was really only like mighty destroyers you could do with like all three at the same time, redeploy, battle shock, like those were really about the only things that you could really kind of like do in spam, so to speak. But even with that was like, man, like just seeing how the army could move across the table with the mighty destroyers and stuff like that, I think was huge. So being able to get around the board, especially on a smaller board now, I think just really put them in a good spot.
When I was doing the book preview, I remember looking at the armies, like, you obviously got Ironjawz, you've got Big Wa, you've got your Cruel Boys, and you've got your Bone Splitters. And I think when I was thinking about it initially, I thought Cruel Boys was the winner. Obviously, the new models, they're always going to get the great stuff. Then I thought it was Ironjawz, then it was Bone Splitters, Big Wa, then Bone Splitters. I feel like Ironjawz, after that errata, has now kind of moved to the top. Yeah, you got a little bit of a change with what people might have thought was going to be a double pile-in piggies at the end of combat, but you've gained a whole bunch of cool things. And there's a lot of viability, whether you go through the piggies, whether you go the brutes, or even the Ard Boys. And I want to get your thoughts around the Ard Boy. I think there's some crack science that sounds good in theory, but in practice, it's a bit of a unicorn. Like, I don't know if the 4+ rally is a strategy I would build around. But I think now, I think Ironjawz does certainly feel closer to Cruel Boys at the top.
No, I would agree with you. I think, in the last book, I think Big Wa kind of took the show on him. over Ironjaw and Bone Splitters. I definitely went that route myself. But then when this book came out, I think I agree with once that FAQ dropped, I think Ironjawz kind of jumped maybe even to the top. And then Cruel Boys, and then Big Wa, and then Bone Splitters down there at the bottom. So yeah, I mean, with the Cruel Boys having the mortal wound damage and the ranged attacks and stuff like that, it was like, ooh, like, like what's the new shiny stuff, right? But looking back at the Ironjawz, I'm like, nothing really got bad. Everything kind of came up, and they kind of have an answer for a little bit of everything. But to your point with the unicorn of the rally on a 4-0, I don't think I've rolled or spent a command point in any of my practice games or any of my other games in 3.0 on rally.
Okay.
Because everybody's still in combat most of the time, or they're dead. So
and that to me is like, I'm like, oh, that sounds great. Like I think that's where I think the trap is. Like I could go 15 Ard Boys, and that's really cheap. Like there's a really good amount of wounds for the points that you're spending, and then the fact that you rally, instead of it being a 6+, it's a 4+. You're like, holy shit, I could bring back potentially half the unit when it kind of gets to the end. And it sounds good in theory, right? And that could help you, say, from losing your grand strategy of hold the line, by retreating those 1 or 2 Ard Boys out, regenerating them, making them harder to kill. But in practice, it's probably something that is might happen. And it's like, well, am I better off putting points into like my brutes, my pickies? I'm seeing a lot of lists right now with 2 more crushers. So, or going a lot of, is it war chanters and things like that? So I think those points kind of get spent elsewhere.
Yeah, I thought about kind of squeezing in some in my list that I took to Michigan GT. But in the end, I ended up taking another hero to get another battalion. One of the sub-heroes was about the same amount of points. So felt like that was the better spend on points than having a couple guys to maybe do something. But no, I think one of the guys I played against, game 5 at Michigan GT was against Noah, who's on the American team. He was running Ironjawz as well. He had a unit of 15 boys in there. So, and played them quite well, and, holding objectives and stuff like that, big unit, they're going to come back, you're going to have to spend some stuff to them. If you're hitting them with shooting, obviously at that point in time, you can do the rally a lot easier, so I think there's definitely a spot for them in the list. Just kind of figuring it out, those double maw crushers definitely take up the points though. So
before I get into the weeds of the new book, I might just, take yourself back a little bit, go back into time. It's, 2019, 2020, and you're playing your Ironjawz. And I think you went 5-0. You've done incredibly well in, the Midwest. What's changed between editions? Because like my country is just restarting, right? So if I'm picking up my Ironjawz for the first time, and it's been a while since I played with them, what's changed between 2nd and 3rd edition, other than the points changes and board size stuff? But for Ironjawz specifically, how has the book changed?
There's definitely a couple of different things there. The way the WoW works has changed with the new book. Ironjawz has a sweet WoW ability that you can do once per game. It's at the start of your charge phase. The whole army board wide, as long as your general's on the table, can declare WoW, and everybody gets +1 to charge. And then on top of that, everybody gets another pip of Ren. So, some things are going from no Ren to Ren 1. Some things are going Ren 2 to Ren 3. Some things are, Ren 1 to Ren 2. So really just allows you to really take advantage of that smashing and bashing that they have in that one round of combat to really just kind of can open your opponent. So
I think that's kind of where like the errata of the piggies going from Ren 1 to Ren 2, then add that once per battle Ironjawz WA to go from Ren 2 to Ren 3.
Right.
Could be massive.
Yeah. I mean,
massive.
Yeah. I didn't get to play with that. They were Ren 1 to Ren 2, which was amazing. So Ren 2 to Ren 3 is just, it's wasn't needed, I don't think, actually, but yeah, I think they wanted to match them up to the brutes. to what the brutes were doing. It's like as far as like weapons and stuff like that. So, but some other things that have changed, the way that the command abilities work on like the Maw Crushers and the Mega Bosses on foot. Those are completely different. They don't have a scroll command trait anymore, but they have a new unique ability that allows them to do the same command 3 different times in a phase for 1 CP, which is huge, especially with the way that we're getting command points now. You can really affect almost like your whole army with things versus 1 to 2 units.
What are you traditionally issuing with those 3 or 2, depending if you've got Gordrak, if you've got the Mega Boss? Like, what's the thing you want to issue?
I mean, I think initially you're doing Mighty Destroyers with them. I like taking the second or the command trait that allows the general to do Mighty Destroyers, even if it's already been called in the game. So with having double Maw Crushers, one guy issues it to 3 different units, himself included, and then the other Maw Crusher, which is the general, issues it to 3 other units. So your whole force is getting a free move in a turn in the hero phase. With the shooting meta and stuff like that, that's huge too, because then you can do the charge in the hero phase and get around that Unleash Hell, because it's not a charge. They're not doing it in the charge phase, it's in the hero phase, so they're not able to do the Unleash Hell. So that's a great way to kind of get around some of the shooting and stuff like that Ironjawz lack, and get shot up on the charge, and next thing you know, you got, went from 10 guys charging to 4 guys charging, and you can do that in the hero phase to avoid some of that.
Because you lost your Ironjawz, Iron Sons battalion, right? And that was a staple in 2nd edition. It seemed like everyone wanted to go for that turn 1 charge.
Yeah.
You gave away first so someone could, like, Arcane Bolt, or you do some damage to yourself and you kind of sneak up forward, and then like that was thinking, right?
Yeah, I think with the GBH 2019, they updated the Ironjawz book. That was before they upgraded the book with Bone Splitters, if I remember correctly. And
I think I've been corrected, by the way. Was it the Iron Fist battalion, or am I? The Iron Sons is the sub faction. Iron.
Yes, Iron Sons was a sub faction. Iron Fist was the battalion. So yeah,
Ironjawz, Iron Fist, Iron Sons.
Right.
Everything's iron, man. Get some gold or some silver. But anyway,
But yeah, there was a 1-drop battalion in there that you could do that made everybody really, you could get ahead of the game. And they also released the spells for the shaman in there too, which had the big green hand, which allowed you to teleport. And back then too, you had bonuses if you're around so many other orcs and stuff like that, or orcs, I should say, with the new pronunciation. So you're teleporting guys. Like, I had a mob of 30 Ard boys that I'd teleport turn 1 and tie up pretty much the whole enemy line, and then would declare Wa with the brooch when we had that from the additional magic items and realms and stuff like that. And some games, I probably averaged about a +7 to +10 attacks per guy. So you put that on a 30-man unit that already has, base 2 attacks, 3s and 3s, Ren 1.
That's massive, yeah.
You pretty much just, then turn 2, 3, you just kind of clean up what they didn't kill.
And probably the other thing that I was thinking about going from 2 to 3, and this was a staple as well, is you'd always have the Bellwind Vortex. I always found was that the Weird Knob Shaman would always cast that Bellwind Vortex, because the army was so fast that you would just lose your targets by the time the little shamans run up the board, and the piggies and the Maw Crushers have just hit the line, and you're out of Mystic Shield, you're out of your general support ranges. So has the loss of Bellwind Vortex messed you up a little bit? Have you noticed the difference?
I did a little bit with this last tournament, playing in 3.0 and stuff, but kind of restructured things a little bit. and really took advantage of that mighty destroyers and be able to put it on 3 different units. So everybody's moving, so you're putting shamans instead of in the back, you're putting them towards the front, and you're moving them forward and you're running them, and you're not getting them into combat, but if you get a free move, then you move again, then you run with them, you're not too far behind. So and trying to plan accordingly with that. So
it's just one of those things, like, there was these staples in second edition where, certain armies had like that, like I was talking to Fire Slayers only recently, and everyone had Lords of the Lodge. That was like the go-to battalion. Everyone took it. And it felt like your lads always had the Balwind Vortex. But I think, the other thing as well is the board sizes have changed a fair bit for you. So, if anyone was going to reap the benefits of the smaller table sizes, and is guaranteeing yourself a turn 1 charge, or just getting into more of those juicier targets, you guys, I think, are in a really good spot. And I think the other thing as well that's probably played into the Ironjawz strengths is the fact that there's less screens in the table. People aren't taking big screens. They aren't stretching themselves further. It's harder to kind of leapfrog those screens, but to get into the juicier things, people are putting more points into heroes and to elite choices, and that's the type of things that you want to smash and bash.
Right. No, it definitely is, because they also just changed the Maw Crusher's destructive bulk ability.
That was the next question I want to ask you, because that to me was like, bowling, where you roll the Maw Crusher in, you might do some chip damage to weaken the unit, then the Maw Crusher hits it, kills it, moves along, hits it, probably kills it. If you get your targets right, you could do 3, 4. I think I might have even seen like a really solid 5 or 6 Mighty Destroyer charge in one particular combat. And I thought that hurt. Like when I saw it go to, what is it, like
now it's a stomp.
D3 plus 3 stomp.
Right, which some things, like Hunters of the Heartland, if you think about that battalion, they can't do it to that, so they lose a big chunk of their war scroll and their ability from a simple battalion that anybody can really take. And it's not hard to get a Hunters of the Battalion ability.
I think they should have been eroded. I feel like you guys should get around Hunters of the Heartland, because when I saw that, I'm like, that sucks. I'm like, that sucks.
Yeah. That was one big thing that I noticed, not having any kind of like impact damage, right? Like you miss that for sure. And I played at the recent tournament at Michigan GT, I played against 2 Suns lists. So there was no stopping. So like that just got thrown out the window, And one of the traits I taken with the new guy, where he does D6 damage instead of D3 on that stomp. So against the right targets, he can do up to 9 damage in one stomp, which is pretty, it'll kill most screens, most heroes, but against Suns, it really didn't do anything. So
yeah, and look, when we move out of Gur and Hunters, because Hunters of the Heartland is not a core battalion, so it sits within the battle pack of General's Handbook. So the minute we move out of the General's Handbook 2021 and into a different battle pack, assuming Hunters doesn't get brought over into the other one, I think that's kind of where destructive bulk is going to really be supercharged. But yeah, right now people are either doing 1-drops using a battle regiment, or they're doing like Warlord and Hunters of the Heartland to make sure that their screens are protected. Like I played against a Stormcast army the other day, a Stormkeep, and they just put everything into Hunters of the Heartland, sat on the middle of objectives, counted for 3 bodies, and just, could accept the charge and regenerate and things like that. So,
well, I think they have a sub-faction, not to get too far off tangent with them, but I think they have a sub-faction that completely it basically makes everybody Hunters of the Heartland without having to do the battalion. So you can still do the other battalions and stuff like that. They ignore all monster reactions. So,
yeah. But look, I think that was probably the big change that I noticed. But, the Maw Crushers got extra wounds. The Gore Hackers got, I think, extra rend. I thought the Brute's new rule was interesting, where that is it a unit or a unit with a wounds characteristic of 1 can't contest an objective if it's within 3 of Brutes or something. There's some type of shenanigans there, I thought, which was like why Brute stock just went through the roof when this book very first came out.
No, I instantly started building up some brutes and stuff like that when I read that rule. I was like, wow, like that's huge because I mean, some of the gaming groups I play in and some of the guys I play against, a lot of undead players, bringing 40 zombies and 20 graveguard and 40 skellies and, bone reapers. And, like you're just not going to chew through that many things. But you walk up 5 brutes to that, you now take the objective. So, like, that's a really great rule. And I think we'll catch a lot of people by surprise with that. And some of those armies that don't have multi-wounded main troops and stuff like that. So,
talk to me about the new stuff, right? Because the new stuff, you got a grand strategy, or you kind of got 2, but like you got an extra grand strategy and you got some battle tactics. I'll ask you about the battalions soon, but you from a battle tactic and a grand strategy point of view, and I've got the rules up if you need it, but like, what's your grand strategy currently, and were you tempted to take on, so the Ironjawz one, for example? So there's show who's boss. You pick the grand strategy if your general is Ironjawz, obviously, and then if there's 2 enemy heroes were slain by attacks by the general, and your general has not been slain, you score your grand strat. A lot of conditions, a lot of win conditions there. You've got to, your general has to kill 2 enemy heroes. What happens if you go up into like Archaon and, he's got like War Shrine and Varangard? What happens if you go into, Suns? Like, I mean, obviously that you've got to kill the heroes, right?
Right. No, you got to kill them in order to win the game there. But no, I thought that was really interesting because I was like, oh, let me see what the new ones are. But it seemed like it was too much criteria in order to like meet it almost, where like we're still trying to learn this edition, I think. So I kept it simple. With me taking, lots of units of battle line, was like, let's just hold the line for right now. And try not to make it like overthink it, So because some lists that you're going to play against, you might not go up against a couple of heroes. Or you're going up against like 2 major heroes that you're, like if you're going up against like Bellicor and Archaon, like.
Well, if I'm playing at the local friendly game store and I'm like, just you and me, Donnie, like, yeah, you might take show 'em who's boss. I think right now at a tournament point of view, there's a lot of hero monsters running around, whether it is, Archaon and Kairos. You're running around with Morathi and a Cauldron of Blood. A lot of people are putting big points into their heroes. So is this something that I want to put my general and tie my... All I have to do is then hide, avoid your general with my heroes. And I can kind of stop you from scoring a grand strat while hold the line. It's probably in a bit more control.
I mean, if it was something like, hey, like if you could kill 2 enemy heroes and your general's still alive, I could see doing that. But being that you have to slay the heroes with your general, I think made it, just that kind of piece that made it a little bit more difficult.
If your general is a Maw Crusher and you guys got extra wounds, Gordrak got extra 3 wounds, and I know the Mega Boss of Maw Crusher lost its armor save characteristic, but you can then change it back to a 3 with the weapon loadout. Are you finding that your general is quite survivable and this could be an achievable grand strat, or are you finding that it potentially dies through the 5 rounds?
I mean, I took 2 Maw Crushers in my most recent one. I had one of them die every game. But I kind of threw one out to be aggressive with one and then kept my general kind of back to make sure to clear WoW when I needed to. He's pretty survivable. I mean, I got him down and like I had to like move away from combat and like redeploy and stuff like that to make sure, because I almost got charged by 2 Mega-gargants. So yeah, he would have been dead then, So yeah. Luckily I had to redeploy, rolled the lucky. I think I rolled a 5 on that redeploy, got out of there, was able to redeploy some other units in the path to kind of block so my general stayed alive and stuff like that, But I mean, as he's killing things, he can definitely, he starts adding wounds back on and stuff like that. There's several times I got up to like 22 wounds off of 18, but against like an army like Suns, you're taking a minute to get one extra wound.
Can your general take down 2 Mega-gargants? Look. I just wanted to bring up that it's an interesting one. I think if you had a more crusher general, it's definitely easier than saying if you're going to take, I don't know, a mega boss on foot.
Oh,
But
for sure.
I think right now it's a bit maybe too hard in the meta right now, just because you're going to find a whole bunch of matchups where there's these superheroes where it's just going to be near impossible because most of their points are in their troops and this mega hero, the godlike hero.
Right. Or if you're going against like realm lords, right, with 3 foxes, you're not going to catch the foxes. It's going to be really hard to, right? And trying to kill those with, killing 2 of those with your general, chasing them around the table in 5 turns is not going to be the easiest thing in the world to be able to do. So,
what about some of the battle tactics? Because you got the other one. I'm not going to talk the other one. The other one requires Kragnos, Gordrak, or the Gobsprak. We'll don't worry about that one. But you got some battle tactics as well, right? You've got was it get stuck? Time to get stuck in, and you've got squish the puny gits. Don't squish any gits. Come on. Hey, come on. In the battle, from the time to get stuck in, you choose it in the first or second turn, and what is it?
Basically, all of your army has to be within 12 inches of the enemy. Within, in that first or second turn. So.
Yeah, of an enemy. So as long as they're within basically combat, right? Is that something that you'll?
I tried to do that one. That one's not too difficult. It just depends on what you're taking in your list. If you're taking like, heavy infantry lists with brutes and ardboys and stuff like that, like chances are you might not be within 12. Moving through things. It also depends on the scenario. Is there objectives that you have to keep guys in the back? And, so you're kind of like...
That was going to be my point, was that you've got to be within 12 inches of an enemy unit by the end of the turn, which means if you've got to hold an objective, you either have to hope that there's an enemy within 12 of that objective and yourself, or you've got to move off the objective to score the battle tactic and get within 12. So something that's super fast and can get you up early, good.
Right.
If you lose the drops as well and your opponent's aggressive, not a bad one.
Right. So, I think I think it's very achievable. It just kind of depends on which way, how that game's going. To your point, if your opponent's charging you with everything and you got everybody within 12, might as well, right? Go after it. So, and then the other one,
I use the other one.
I use the other one more towards the end of games, when things were kind of getting cleaned up and they only had like 1 battle line unit left. I'm like, all right, that's kind of same thing as broken ranks, right? Broken ranks is a little bit different wording and stuff like that. You just pick a single one. It doesn't matter if there's other ones left, but this one you have to just make sure there's no enemy battle lines left on the table. So I found that one more useful towards the end of the games versus in the beginning and stuff like that. I usually went with broken ranks first and then countered with that one as I wore down the battle line units.
Yeah, and the great thing, obviously, with the battle tactics is it's not something you have to choose instead of. It's either you got a list, you've got your battle pack battle tactics, plus you've got the battle tactics from the book, and you choose what's best as opposed to the grand strategy where it's either I take, pillars of belief, hold the line, or, I've got something very specific. I'm going to choose, in and out lads or show them who's boss. That I think battle tactics, your side definitely good. Grand strats. I wouldn't take it at a tournament. I'd happy to play it at my local game store. I would not play it at a tournament.
Something where maybe a little bit more for fun, like, hey, let me see if I can actually do this, right? Like set yourself your own challenge. Can my general run up, kill a couple heroes, stay alive in the game? It definitely is going to be a little bit more challenging in that regard.
Actually, a good question from Phil. I probably missed this one, was what about the wild grand strategy? So blah, blah, blah. If you pick the model to be your general or a friendly battle line unit that's wholly within enemy territory. So That's not a too bad one. I'm going to quickly bring up the grand strats, but that's actually not a bad one as well.
No, that one's not too bad. It requires you to be positioned on the table at a certain spot. Where the current hold the line with a battle line unit can be anywhere on the table. It doesn't have to be in the enemy territory. And some of the new
the deployment zones.
Yeah, I'm like, the deployment zones, not all of them are half and half of the table. Some of them are just those small little pieces. So depending on things, that can make things a little bit more difficult. So, but
I like it.
Again, not bad by any means. And again, something where maybe not at a tournament, but or maybe a smaller tournament that you're like, hey, I got a unit. This is their goal every game, is to run across the table.
Yeah, like if you've got like a brute build or an Ardboy build, and you just want 3 piggies, or you're going to take a more crusher, just something to like just be a missile launcher. Absolutely, it's not a bad one. I'll give you that. War is not too bad. The other one that kind of is very very nuanced and very specific is going to be the core battalion you got, which was you got one, which is the Ironjawz Fist. That basically requires you to have 2 troops? Is it troops?
Basically, just 2 troops. So, which could be
2 mandatory troops and then 3 optional troops.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, really, any of the Ardboys, Brutes, Gorgruntas, any of those can fit into that. So, and it gives you a free all-out attack, which is nice. Or the Unleash Hell, but which they're not unleashing hell. So, but yeah, so
like there's no situation where you unleash hell.
I mean, technically the Maw Crusher could, but he can't go in that battalion. So.
There's not a troop, so yeah, so
right.
Like, there's no like. All right, but like, would you? And I guess this is a good option if you can't take like double Warlord. If you didn't want to fill up your army with a couple of the smaller troops, and you just want to go in with heavy, more crushers, or you don't want to go hero hammer and you want to do more troops, this is a nice way to go, like Warlord and Iron Fist, or, you could go, Battle Regiment and this, but I think I'd rather, like, do you need the extra free command given things like your mega bosses and your more crushers can do 2 and 3 anyway?
Depending, because you might have. There's a couple times where I've teleported a unit across the table, where they weren't within range of my Maw Crusher in order to give from his ability to do it all, right? So allowing them to get a free, all-out attack is not bad. And it only requires you to take 2 units. So it's not really requiring you to take a whole lot of stuff. So I could definitely see it being viable. Just kind of depends on what else you're putting in your list and stuff like that. If you're not taking a bunch of the sub-heroes, the sub-commanders, you're taking like 2 Maw Crushers, and then filling out some other stuff, not taking all the sub-heroes, you might not have other battalions. And this is a nice one just to get a free all-out attack in there.
Yeah, and like if you are going to build, I would try to go like a low drop battle regiment, and you got a couple of extra troops that you can't quite fit into your battle regiment. Do you A, hunters, B, go the Iron Fist, whatever it was? Iron Fist. Yeah, like that actually might work, because you might not need hunters, or you might not care about monstrous rampage. What you'd prefer is having the extra CP, because you are hand of gawking them, you are doing something, as opposed to it's not bad actually. It's not too bad.
I mean, brutes coming in swinging on 2s is a lot better than swinging on 3s, and doing that for free, because you are spending CPs on Mighty Destroyers, on redeploy, on all the other stuff that you come to a point where you have to have like some resources, right? And you can only have so many CPs. So being able to get a few free cheeky ones in there, definitely not a bad thing.
And things like the brutes and ard boys can they can issue commands themselves, right? They've got the elite models. They can issue. They don't need a hero.
They have a champ.
Yeah.
So they're not elite, but they do have champs, so they can do it to themselves. So
yeah, I tell you what, the chat is for some reason the chat's obsessed with rogue idols. They're just like, guys, settle down. We're talking more crushes here. We're talking about that big rock. Would you bring in I'm thinking about the 3D printing. He's called Dwayne the Rock Johnson. Best name for a 3D printed rogue idol ever. But let's talk about some of those. Would you bring in a rogue idol to a Ironjawz list?
I definitely would think about it for sure. I think they could benefit from a few things in there. I'd have to check the wording with the new stuff as far as keywords and stuff like that. I haven't really spent a lot of time looking at their news scroll. When I was running Big Wa in late 2nd edition, had a rogue idol in there. And he was awesome because you could buff him from the Bone Splitter side, buff him from the Ironjawz side, and he just went to town. So,
yeah, he was a great big Wa, especially if you got like the triple cast and he's flying like 40 odd inches, just gets in your face. He's just a nightmare and really good. And I wish that he wasn't like 420 odd points because then my gits could ally it in. It's just that fraction too much for my gits. But then let's talk about some of the other friends. You got Craggy, Kragnos, the Ender of Empires, the man that I think is the biggest liar in the world, telling me he's killed all the dragons, yet has no mortal wound protection. What are your thoughts on Kragnos? Would you bring him in an Ironjawz list? And if you do, what would he bring to the party?
I would definitely consider it. I was actually thinking about it for this last tournament. I took Kragnos over the summer in my first 3.0 tournament with Suns.
He's bloody expensive. I couldn't believe he went up in points. Like,
the fact that
it was hard to justify like at 500, 600. Now he's like 700 odd points.
Yeah, when he went up to 720, I was like, that's just, nice thing he does smash through some more other monsters. And with people bringing the monsters right now, like he just wrecks hell on them. I walked up to a turtle from Deepkin, popped 20 wounds on it and took it off the table. And the Deepkin guy's like, what just happened? So,
because they rely on that turtle. That turtle is so good. And if he gets his bite off, it could do like flat 6 mortal wounds. So it's nasty. Yeah. But and I think just to call out Hades really quickly, Hades mentioning that the rogue idol has all 3 keywords, both Cruel Boys, Ironjawz, and Bone Splitters. So if that's true, good to see there's some interesting synergies, because traditionally it only synergized either Gits or the Bone Splitter side. It didn't quite work. But that's a good viable option. But back to that Ender of Empires.
Yeah. I think he brings some interesting things. Being a second general is nice because you can basically make him call Wa, right? Which is definitely something that was a little bit nervous about, only having one general on the table technically to be able to call that. Because if I ran into a heavy shooty army and, I got 18 wounds, but you can take that off pretty quickly, against the right shooting list and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely some stuff there. He also buffs with the aura of the leadership or the bravery. So I think that's important as well, especially when you're trying to do heroic recovery and stuff like that on the guys, because everybody's bravery kind of took a few pips down across on Ironjawz, so that's definitely helpful. But I think the point cost is just where I was struggling to like really try to fit them in to some things.
I think for me, the thing that I'm concerned about right now in the current state of the game is that people are building lists to handle Mega-gargants. They're looking at Megas going, how can I pull down a 35 wound, maybe even more if you got the Amulet of Destiny? Like, how do I pull this thing down? And when I look at Craggy with no mortal wound save, and it was the same kind of thing that I looked at when I saw the Stormcast Dragons, and they didn't have a mortal wound save. The risk there is that people are going to be looking at high damage options. And if Craggy doesn't get the charge and it doesn't do as much damage as it wants to, and you're the recipient of a battle regiment who goes first and just does a whole bunch of damage, I think Craggy is a big risk, and I'd probably personally, that 700 points is another more crusher. It's more piggies, it's more brutes, it's some ard boys, it's some support heroes.
No, I mean that's a unit of pigs and a maw crusher. So like,
it's a big trade. It's a big trade. What you get.
And when I ran him with my sons, I lost all 5 games. He died all 5 games. So, you know, I mean, when you're thinking about it, you know, 4 years ago, 18 wounds sounds, it would have been like, what? You know, 18 wounds, right? You know, but now
I remember
it's
how
like,
long it used to take me forever to kill a. I remember, like, was it the Magma Dragons? You know, I had an Ironjawz player once bring up a 1 or 2 Magma Dragons in their list, and Magma Dragons had 20 wounds, and it was crazy good at the time. Now, like,
you blink at it. So, yeah. So I think, you know, I think there's some play there if you really wanted to with him. I think he could do some good things in that list. I just think the point cost with no ward save is a bit too much.
I could see a list with the Kragnos and, let's say, a bunch of piggies. I think, you know, like a really strong, you know, charge. But obviously, you'd have to build around not getting some of the, you know, the triple command point stuff and, you know, the benefits that a more crusher brings. So I guess pros and cons. But the other thing is that you mentioned is the Mega-gargant. That's another option that if I was going to spend 500 plus points and bring something in, I've got the Rogue Idol, I've got Kragnos, I've got a Mega. And I think I'd probably rather a Mega, whether it's either an objective kicking Mega, a damage dealing Mega, you know, one of the gate breakers. I think that to me is probably a more viable option and a little less points.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think I would, you know, gate breaker at 525 versus 720 for Kragnos. You know, you're giving yourself basically 200 points back. You're gaining almost double wounds, you know, going from 18 to 35. And you hit, I mean, other than like the impact damage stuff, right? You know, I mean, his flail swinging 10 times, it's going to wreck through some stuff for sure. So, you know, and you don't get the big count as 20 on objectives and stuff like that, but you're still counting as 5. You're still a monster. He has a movement 12, so he's not being left behind. So, you know,
and if you put that Mega-gargant on that 6-inch kind of circumference of an objective, there's not a lot of things you can put onto that. You know, that big pie plate is hard to put other models around if you position it correctly.
Yeah. And don't forget, I mean, because he would be the one that's the special one that also has like the deadly breath thing too, where he hits people afterwards after combat, I believe. So
I think for me, actually, it would be if I was in your shoes, and I'm not an Ironjawz player. I'm a little stabber. I'm a grot. But I think for me, maybe this is theory hammer. So you tell me, Donnie, if I'm a bit, you know, had one too many death cap mushrooms. But the Kraken Eater, Bundo, the ally, I could see that kind of working well, kicking the objective and moving it forward along with your army, so that as your piggies, as your Maw Crusher, as your brutes are kind of moving up to battle, so is the, you know, some of those primary objectives that you're trying to retain, so that, you know, there's a lot of deep striking and coming in from reserves at the moment, and, you know, you want to be in the fight. You want to have as many bodies in the fight within synergy ranges as possible. You don't want to leave stuff behind, and you don't want to have like your War Chanter just the only thing holding an objective. So I could see, you know, a Gargant kicking things up, throwing some rocks over the fence, and, you know, when needed, it can kind of swing into combat and do some damage. That's how I would look at it.
No, I think that would also be a great tactic there. So, you know, being able to move those objectives from playing with sons and being able to move the objectives is huge. And that was one thing, you know, when I played here recently, you know, what was holding my back line most of the time was my, you know, 1 or 2 war chanters, my shaman, like 5-6 wound heroes hanging out in the back with a 4-up save. That's it, you know. So, so definitely having something else back there to kind of support would definitely be really nice. So, And not really, you don't even hang it back because you're moving that objective forward, right?
No, correct. And the Kraken Eater has a really good shooting attack as well. So you could be picking things out, breaking coherency, which I've been burning to ask you. Actually, I should have asked this a lot earlier. Is how have you found coherency with your army, right? Because once you start reinforcing a unit, let's say your piggies, we go from 3 to 6, we start changing the game with coherency. Has that changed your thoughts on having big blocks of piggies? Has it thought about making them, trying to get them battle line to double reinforce? Like, how is coherency and the reinforcing kind of changed your view on the army?
Definitely has. There's a couple, with most recent list, was thinking about doubling up and reinforcing pigs to 6. Just because when you can put the buffs on them, war chainer buff and whatnot, it's just going to be that much more effective. But I didn't want to be limited by the movement piece of that too, and the coherency. And really, I thought 3 was better because I could throw some different guys out for screens. I could throw different units to things, and felt like that just was an overall better option. I think if you're going non-maw crushers, right, and you're doing a couple mega bosses, then yeah, having a unit of 6 pigs or even a unit of 9 pigs, if you're making them out of bloodtooths and doing them as battle line and stuff like that, being that they count for 2 each for objectives and stuff like that as well, being that they're 5 wounds, and with especially with the new FAQ update with the Rend as well, I think you're always going to want to run them with the Gorhakas. You're going to get that 2-inch reach. So really, you can actually go over the top with that over top of the other bases and stuff like that. So depending on how you format your unit into combat and stuff like that. So, but I think brutes being at 10. They're pretty slow anyways at 4-inch move. I don't think the coherency part really hurt them too much. And if you're running them with the Gorhakas, they got the 2-inch reach, so they can go over.
That was the point that I wanted to make, because if you start going, because when you go into 1-inch weapons, you do a lot of trade-offs with your coherency because you don't have 25 mil bases. Like you lose attacks, which is kind of why I get a little bit worried about double reinforcing piggies. Like with a block of 9. How many are actually going to get into combat versus how many are there for redundancy? Because you will lose a couple of piggies kind of as they go up the board.
Right, and for like Unleash Hell, you're going to lose 1 or 2, right? So I mean, definitely that's something to think about. But as you mentioned, that unicorn, right? You throw a rally on them, you get a couple of pigs back, man. That's going to dampen your opponent's day for sure. So.
Actually, another idea I just had, because I've been thinking about this and I love it, is that Marsh Crawler Slogoth to get that +1 to hit bubble. Is that something that you would be thinking about adding to your list? I know it's now got the Cruel Boy keyword, so the errata didn't change anything for you. But the thing that I obviously love about the Slogoth is that its ability of an 18-inch, so it's quite a large bubble, affects friendly. Not keyword, friendly. So It means you could have this aura of a Slogoth walking up the board, giving you +1 to hit, and then issuing other different commands and not having to worry about it.
No, I mean, I think I definitely would. If you could ally in like Cruel Boys and Ironjawz, right?
You can't. Can you not do it?
No. You can't ally in any of the 3. So if you're taking Big Wah, I think that's an auto include in your list. If you don't, like, why not? 150 points to give an 18-inch aura +1 to hit. And the guy has like 12 wounds and a regen. So like he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So.
All right. Well, then why wouldn't you go? Why wouldn't I go Big Wah then? So like what's Ironjawz giving me that Big Wah wouldn't? Because the Big Wah table changed, by the way. And I think it got reduced. It got aligned to Age of Sigmar 3, but it certainly feels a little less powerful than it used to be.
Right. it definitely changed of how quickly you can build up the points in it, for sure. You lose smashing and bashing, so you don't get to get that chain attacks going. You also lose the Wa as far as the +1 to charge and additional -1 Ren, which is pretty powerful. So, and then you lose some of the other like sub-faction type things. I played Bloodtooth in mine, which allowed the Gorgruntas to be battle line, and then also gave them a nice little move after combat, which was pretty neat. But like Iron Suns is another one where you can counter, especially now with the FAQ of what they did with the mega bosses and the command abilities there, being able to issue 1 CP and have 3 units counter charge your opponent with Iron Suns is huge.
But you can't fight now. That was clarified in the errata that you can do the Iron Suns charge at the end of combat, but you don't get to fight.
Correct. But if somebody was trying to get away, or you wanted to tie up a unit, or keep say you blew up the screen, but you couldn't get to their shooters, right? And then you move that at the end of combat, you charge the shooting unit. You're sacking that unit, but now they have to shoot you or retreat. And it saves your Maw Crusher sitting there and not getting shot by a unit.
And they couldn't use Unleash Hell, right? Because Unleash Hell would happen in the charge phase where, and this is probably one of the cool things as well. Like if you can charge in the hero phase, if you can do something outside of the a particular phase, I can't Unleash Hell, I can't redeploy because you're doing it in the combat phase or the hero phase. So building around those types of little tricks, I found even like when I was playing a game with my Daughters of Cain Bow Snakes, and I was shooting in the hero phase. And they're like, I want to do, all out defense. So like, well, you can't, because that is an ability you cannot issue in the hero phase. So there's some interesting, and even Flamingo Pie said you could prevent rally as well because you're now in combat. So you can't unless you've got like a hero phase retreat. Like there's some cool shenanigans there.
No, it really is. So I think there's definitely some stuff there. I think I'm going to look at Big Wad now that I've had the book for a little bit longer. I got the book like a week before the tournament hit, because it was on delay and whatnot. And, but definitely looking at that a little bit to see. But Ironjawz is a fun list to play. It's great to as it being somewhat one-dimensional, you don't have shooting, you don't really have heavy magic, right? You're literally, a lot of fighting, a lot of combat, but they do it really well. But they also have a lot, like as you mentioned just a second ago, just all those other little things and little ways to kind of get around abilities and do abilities in different phases. Really, I think adds a lot of strategic thinking there in that list. So
I don't want to talk too much about Big War because this is not the Big War show, but I think if you're thinking about like a little bit of diversity, or you want to kind of break it up a little bit, you want to play with some killer bows, if you want to try something else, I think there's a really good opportunity to have some killer bows in the backfield with a shaman, and then you got the Gore Grunters running up the board, or the brutes protecting that screen as opposed to the Gut Rippers. But coming back to Ironjawz, I think the thing that I really want to know as well, and I want to get to your list soon, folks, the list is coming. I want to put some context and some meat around the bones. But you mentioned, the 3 sub-allegiances, your Iron Suns, your Bloodtooths, and your Big Choppers. How do you think those 3 compare? Do you think they're all even? Do you think there's one that's certainly a clear winner or a clear loser? And obviously one big change as well is that, Gore Grunters become battle line only in... what was it?
Bloodtooth.
In Bloodtooth. So that's a change, right? That wasn't a restriction previously.
No, previously Gore Grunters were just straight battle line. Brutes, Gore Grunters, and Ardboys in the previous book were all battle line. So I mean that was definitely something to think about when I was building my list. I also kind of looked at what I had already put together and painted and done up, I think think it really depends on how you're building your army. I think all three are great. I mean, the Chapas, if you weren't taking multiple war chanters and stuff like that, being able to pick 3 units of brutes or 3 units of ard boys to do their violent fury on, to give them all additional damage, is awesome. And especially if you're doing a heavy brute list or a heavy ard boy list, I think definitely would want to lean towards that. Previous edition, you had to have like a war chanter, or not a war chanter, but your shaman was like your general, and like it was some kind of, and like the artifacts and command traits that you had to take with that never felt like they were all that great.
And I love the unlocking of all that rubbish, right? Because I'm finding that right now, again with my daughters, where I really want to run one particular build, but there's the artifact tax, there is a command trait tax, and it's not the one that I want to run. I want to run Master of Magic. I want to try to pick something else, and I don't want to take Warlord or a command regiment just to get an extra artifact. I'd rather go to a prayer or a spell. But the fact that that's kind of been unlocked and you can choose your own command trait, you can choose your own artifact without going into Warlord, as an example, has really freed up those 3 sub-allegiances. And it's a change that I really like for 3E. It gives me more customization to the build that I want to run.
No, I would completely agree with you there, because that was one thing that was always like, you kind of almost made you go away from certain sub factions because you didn't want to have to do some of the stuff that they were requiring you to do.
You got this stupid artifact where you're like, there's just a better artifact that I want to choose, and I got to take it. It's token, and I don't want to run it, but I have to run it. And you never use it, you don't remember it, but you've got some good options here. By the way, just a spoiler, I love Iron Suns. Yeah. I love the counterplay of Iron Suns. It is the perfect thing for me, because the one thing Age of Sigmar 3 has felt to me is it's more interactive. It's not you go, I go. When Donnie's playing, I'm on social media until I have to, I don't know, do a couple of things, like try to dispel his army. And if he double turns me, I might as well go to the bar and just, tell me when I need to roll my unbinds. But the counterplay that Iron Suns brings, along with Rally, along with Redeploy, along with Unleash Hell, along with some of the other shenanigans, that screams to me as a player who enjoys counterplay. That's my type of build.
Yeah, no. Noah at Michigan GT, who was running the other Ironjawz list, and we were playing game 5 top table, and he was running Iron Suns, and he was, it really made me think as his opponent of I can get up to so many, but I had a kind of counter block where he could counter charge my units and stuff like that, because I was trying to minimize my attacks back, right? So I'm trying to pick certain targets, but then if I pick that target, he can now countercharge with these 3 units back at me. So then I had to move other units up to block or do different things in order, so it really, to play against it, definitely made you really think about what you're doing and where you're committing to. I think playing with it would just be loads of fun. Because, you want to charge this guy? Okay, well, his buddies are coming along for the fight too, so.
Yeah, people will charge and always try to you'll see top tables, right? You'll get all the combat gauges and you put it around so you can not drag someone into combat within 3. So you put the charge in perfectly, and, you're like, well, cool. Well, you try to avoid my mega boss, you try to avoid something in my army. Cool, I'm now going to countercharge you and I'm going to get into combat. And if you didn't screen appropriately, I might be able to sneak around and kind of tag something really juicy that you don't want me to get into, that I really want to fight.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to building out some brutes and building out some ard boys to be able to do a Iron Suns.
Well, Puff and Stuff has asked, and it's probably a good timing, brutes versus ard boys. I don't think they're comparable. I think Fallen has nailed it on the head. For me, it's brutes every day. I think the ard boy stuff right now is cheap wounds, cheap bodies, not a bad screen, throw it into hunters. rally might be okay, but don't build around, this 15 block of Ard boys. I'm going to keep bringing them back on a 4+, and there's going to be undieable unit, because it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting 10 Ard boys for the same cost of 5 brutes, you know. Light tech. Yeah, definitely. They have two different roles.
Yeah, they do two very different things. They, brutes are your bashers, and your Ard boys. I mean, the shields on the Ard boys are always good as well. They do a bit of mortal wound reflection, but they're there to chap up the board. They're there to screen out. They're there to soak up the damage if you get a mirror match or someone who wants to run into you.
Yeah, no, I think the to the guys' points there that a couple people have just said, they definitely played two different roles. I think with them being only 85 points, you only have, I think, what is it, 8 scrolls total, I think, or 9 scrolls total for Ironjawz. So, sometimes being able to fit those point costs in, you might need to, instead of taking 3 units of brutes, you might have to drop 1 down to a unit of Ard boys, right? In order to fit into that battle line requirements and stuff like that. So I think they fill that role, but then, they can do some other things. They can hold some backline type stuff. They can screen some different things. So it just... But they're there to take it versus the brutes are there to deal it. So,
and you don't want to screen with brutes. You do not want to be screening with brutes. You don't want to be having them as your only bodies, because if you get someone who's got really good range damage, they're just going to clear your brutes before they get into combat, or at least clear off some of your good damage. But if you can protect them in some way and choose the fights that you want to choose, especially if you're going brutes and not really a lot of piggies, then I think Ard boys and having some type of Ard boys is a worthwhile investment, and it means you can put your points elsewhere.
Right.
Cool. All right, we kind of cover that off. Anything else you talk about from like a changes point of view, or should I bring up your list? Because I think you got some mount traits, you got some spells, you got some artifacts, you got some mount traits as well. So command traits. Sorry, you got some command traits, and we'll obviously talk about them with your list, but. I think overall you're in a really good spot. I think there's a lot of more positives than negatives. Although you got no priests, unfortunately. I think that was probably the thing that surprised me, and it was more of a bone splitter thing. That you don't get access to curse, you don't get access to any of those generic prayers,
which definitely would have been nice. However, I think the war chanters, with them having the different beats on their war scroll is nice. You get a heal in there, you get a +1 to hit bubble in there. It's not really a bubble, but a +1 to hit in there. It's actually really quite nice when you're charging multiple things at one unit to destroy it. Like playing against Suns, I would choose one of the megas to get myself +1 to hit, so everybody that was attacking them got +1 to hit from that beat. So I could spend my CP instead of doing a all-out attack. I could turn around and do all-out defense on my guys when you swung back at me, right? So not only am I kind of getting best of both worlds there. So I think they add in some kind of play that role of the priest without having those priest-type spells. So it's just the
more time
away, right?
Just more time for bashing, right?
Right. So I think one other thing that hurt, we talked about like the destructive bulk on the mega or the maw crushers. Losing the range on their attacks hurts. Everything's 1 inch
on the maw crusher.
On the maw crusher, the mount and the rider are both 1 inch.
Did you ever have a 3 inch, or was it always 1 and 2?
It was 1 and 2, but 2 inch reach. Especially with the destructive bulk and different things like that, where you're blowing up the screen or different things, and then you're trying to, pile in still from charging, you could still tag some stuff and still do some damage. Only having 1 inch, there's a couple times where I tried to like hit a small hero that was behind a line of, guys, and you just couldn't quite get to that, where if they were at 2 inch, definitely would have been able to do it. So, that was, but I think the only other real negative thing I think that really noticed on them. So,
it might just change a little bit to how you position your mega boss on more crusher because you don't have the 2-incher. But that's it's a good. I think overall, again, we kept talking about the positives. Donnie has given me one of his many lists, and this is certainly not the only way to run Ironjawz. Donnie, is that correct? That's 100%.
Correct.
Yep. So if you want to run the brutes, and I might ask you questions towards the end about a brute kind of build and those types of things, but you've gone down probably a really good build right now for the current meta. Who am I? You're a 5-0 guy. Don't worry about me. You've got double cabbage. You've got 2 more crushes on mega boss, more crushes on mega boss, more mega bosses on more crushes, and you've got some interesting loadouts. Amulet of Destiny. You've got the Arcane Tome. Probably Flaming Weapon. Yep, there it is, Flaming Weapon. You got yourself a couple of small heroes, 3 War Chanters, 1 Shaman. Kill and beat, fix and beat, kill and you got all 3 of the beats. You've got yourself 4 units of 3 of the Gore Grunters, so no double reinforced or even any reinforced Gore Grunters.
Yeah.
And interestingly, you've wrapped them up in Warlord, so you've got yourself 2. You can either get 2 artifacts, or you get yourself an extra spell or a prayer or whatever, and you've got yourself a mount trait and an artifact. So you're 10 drops. And
yes.
It's an interesting question I want to ask you about, because I have seen some people talking about the value of Battle Regiment and should I be going low drops to get the kind of the turn 1 jump, and how 10 drops has even impacted your play style in your list. Like, why have you gone that over Battle Reg?
Partly went with the Warlords because I wanted to get the extra artifact, the extra mount traits, and then really when I started doing that, it was like, well, I was going to be at probably like 5 drop kind of thing anyway. So like at that point in time, like what's 10 drops, right? And the army, with being able to do the 6 units with having that command trait of Mega Bossy, which allows you to do Mighty Destroyer again, basically. So both Maw Crushers can issue Mighty Destroyer. Having 6 units be able to get a free move in that hero phase, it really didn't matter if I went first or second. It was my thinking with it. And, I could deploy a back line and I can still, my Maw Crushers are going 24 inches because they get a 12-inch move with the Mighty Destroyer. They get another 12-inch move. Then they charge 2d6. And if I wanted to I could do it with a +1. So, like, they're getting across the table. You're not hiding them too many things out of the way.
And as an opponent, it's always been my conundrum. Do I deploy at the closest I can be on my deployment zone and make your charge easier? Or do I backfield as much as possible to make your charge harder? But then with all your movement shenanigans, I'm really just pinning myself in my deployment zone and making my job harder to get objectives. Like, do I just like grit and bear it and just hope for the best? And I think that's kind of been like some of the way to kind of handle, because you can't avoid it. Like, unless you're Carriage and Overlords and you split the force up across the board and then fly high and move around, right? It's quite hard to avoid an Ironjawz charge.
No, and I mean, and on top of that, you also got the teleport in there too from the Shaman. So I mean, really, granted that's on a 7+, not the easiest thing to cast, but not the most difficult thing either, right? So. But yeah, just kind of went that way to get the extra things. In all the games I've played in 3.0, having with the mount trait of Loudum on the general, having that roar ability and denying people command abilities in the combat phase has been huge. And with Loudon, you can do it to everybody within 3 inches, not just one unit.
Cool. So, no, that's good. I was looking up while you're talking, I'm just looking up some of the things. I'm like, oh, this is
gotcha.
good.
Okay. Yeah. So like I played against a Flesh Eater game and had some monsters and roared at them, and they couldn't, do their extra pile in, and they couldn't do their, fight after death and, all that stuff, because those are all command abilities. And, and if you roar them, they just kind of shut down like half of what they are able to do. So just had found that to be very beneficial. Also just denying like all out defense, and that kind of stuff as well. Obviously went with Amulet Destiny just for the survivability, being
Can
that
I
he's my
ask you
general.
about Can I
Yeah,
ask about your command trait? Because you've obviously got Mega Bossy, right, which is allowing you to do the extra Mighty Destroyers. Do
yeah.
you think there's a bit of value in play in there by switching that out to the Mighty War leader to allow the free reroll? Well, not free, but you can do reroll charges for Ironjawz within 12.
Definitely thought about that. I've ran ogres with the Stonehorn being able to do the reroll charge bubble, which is awesome. So definitely thought about that. If I wasn't running 2 cabbages, might have went that route. Might have went the route with the hulking brute to be able to do the D3 mortar wound impact, basically on top of like a stomp or something like that, to really just kind of smash through some stuff.
So if you had a traditional like more crusher, when I say traditional, like when I played opponents in 2E, it would often be 1 more crusher. It would be a couple of units of piggies. You might have some ard boys or some brutes as well, but it was mostly around having more piggies on the table and less more crusher. That could be a nice little play potentially. But and look, I like Mega Bossy. Don't get me wrong. I'm just looking at this. Like, I also think that Mighty War lead is also a good choice, but probably not in this particular list.
No, I definitely think it is. The other one I really thought about doing is instead of taking the Amulet Destiny on him, giving him the Arcane Tome to make him a wizard, and then doing the Touch by Wa, which normally you wouldn't think about taking on a Maw Crusher because he's not normally a wizard, but now that he's a wizard, you can do he basically is, pick an enemy or pick a unit within 6. So depending on things, what you're doing, but you can do some mortal wounds in that casting and then add that to your casting. And then there's a great spell, which is the Basham Lads. It's an 8+ to cast, but it adds, you get +1 to wound to all Ironjawz wholly within 16. So it has a 16-inch bubble for +1 to wound,
which is huge. That's massive.
Right.
There's not a lot of ways to get around to get pluses to wound, which is why things like the Frostheart Phoenix have become really powerful, because -1 to wound is a huge debuff. There's not a lot of ways to counter. Pluses to hit easy, no problem.
Yeah, no, I really thought about doing that with tagging that with some Gorgruntas with the Mega or with the Maw Crusher, being able to go up, giving them all out attack +1 to wound. So they're 2s and 2s. Now Ren 2 or Ren 3 with Wa, and if you're hitting them with the War Chanters, 2 damage a pop, like it's just, and then you activate that Mighty Destroyers, it's just, it can wreak havoc.
And to Travis's point as well, and we kind of talked about this at the top of the show, one of the challenges you've got with Mighty Destroyers is the fact that there is a lot of hunters, and a lot of players are building in Warlord and Hunters, or they're doing even Battle Regiment and Hunters, and they're then choosing non-battle line units to be their screens in Hunters, so that you don't even give away broken ranks as a battle tactic as well. So if you are in a meta or in a competition, you're seeing armies are having a lot of Hunters of the Heartland. I could see, not relying and not putting too many of your artifact and army choices into Mighty Destroyers, because you will come up against armies where it's worth nothing. So it's a challenge right now. So don't put all your eggs into the Mighty Destroyers basket.
No, for sure. And I thought with like the Arcane Tome being to give me the option for an extra dispel up front, or unbind, depending on what I was going with. Honestly, like in 5 games, I think I cast Flaming Weapons once. So it was kind of pointless. I think really looking at that now and going back at it, I probably would have added the Destroyer on there, on that guy instead. Where it's
is
just
this your Michigan GT list? Remind me.
Yeah, this was my Michigan GT list that I took.
So this went 5-0, folks. This went 5-0. This was pre-errata. So again, pros and cons. I don't think there's a lot of things that you would have leveraged in Michigan GT that has now you've lost. So I think you've only actually gained since you're 5-0.
No, I mean gaining extra rent on all the Gorgruntas, and then really allow in like the mega bosses to be able to do all out attack, all out defense. Really kind of changing some of the redeploy stuff, I think would have been beneficial as well, with how their command structure with the FAQ is now.
Something that when I was doing the preview of this particular book, and it's an artifact that I'm going to ask you about, because I'm looking at this going, it sounds sexy, but is the trade-off worth it? And that's the Armor of Gork, where you get the 6-up ward. You're like, great, I could get Amulet of Destiny on one. I could get, a 6-up ward from the Armor of Gork on the other. So I've got a super durable double cabbage list. But I'm trading 2 inches of movement. I get the 6-up ward. I get +1 to hit, so I don't have to worry about all that attack and things like that. Or I've got some, protection for debuffs. Is trading 2 inches of movement, and you can't run as well? I think that was the other part, like the ability not to run. Is that a big trade-off for you, or is it not so much because of some of the other movement shenanigans?
I thought about doing that just to have the extra protection, but it's not just -2 move. It's really -4, because if you're using the Mighty Destroyer hero move, right, you're losing 2 inches there. Then you're moving your movement phase, you're losing 2 inches there. So he goes from a 24-inch move to a 20-inch move, which still 20-inch move is great, right? But sometimes they're on those big bases, so an extra 4 inches can be really huge there. So
it can help you jump a screen, or you get the 2 inches accumulatively, but it gets you to where you need to be.
Yeah. And I mean, with the healing and stuff like that they're doing as they're attacking and everything like that, really didn't think that they went for more damage than for survivability on the second Maw Crusher. So he pretty much died every game. But I threw him across the table, slingshot him like a missile, and he went bowling and blew up stuff. So that's why I went with Meaning on him. So when he did get his stomp off, if it wasn't against hunters or a different monster, he's doing D6 +3 damage on a stomp. So
with your 3 war chanters, right? I know you're trying to fulfill the warlord battalions because you've got 2 warlords, right? So that's going to need 2 sub-commanders. Yeah, you need 2 sub-commanders per warlord. If you like, are they? Obviously, they've got some shenanigans through the various beats that they can possibly do, and yes, they're filling in warlord. Is there anything else that the war chanters are bringing to the table other than the heal, the buff pieces, and the sub commander things?
I mean, they're doing, with the buff being the extra damage, picking a unit within 15 and they get the extra damage, is worth their points. Just if it was just that, I think it'd be worth their points. They're actually surprisingly fairly decent. With, they got 6 attacks, 3s and 3s. They're no rem, but they're D3 damage each. So against, I had 2 of them that went up against a small unit and blew up the unit because they're doing D3 damage with 12 attacks.
The war chanter?
Yeah, they have 6 attacks each.
Oh, of course. If you got them in power pairs or something.
Well, yeah, I had 2 of them that I was like, well, let me see if I can blow this up and take care of that. And the other thing it's nice is the scenario where you had to leave a hero to claim the objective. I could run up, get the Maw Crusher, take care of what I need to take care of. He runs up behind, War Chanter, moves on to it afterwards, and the Maw Crusher goes forward and keeps destroying.
Have you looked into the Hades always jumps in the chat and always has this burning question. There's always 2 people in the channel have always got the same type of question. Hades always asks me about the warbands, the Underworld's warbands, and Torrell always asks me about Mega-gargants. Do you have any opinions of the Underworld's warband? Is it the Iron Skull Boys?
Yep. Actually looked at taking both of them in this list. I ended up doing the Shaman and the Inn. Because I was actually going to put the Arcane Tome on one of the War Chanters to make him a wizard. and give him the big green hand of Gork to move guys around and stuff like that, and kind of dual purpose that role and not have to, take the shaman. But in the end, with the double warlords, I took the shaman. But no, I think they're both pretty good. I like the Iron Skull boys better, just because they got a 5-up ward save. So it makes them just that much more survivable. It gives you 4 bodies instead of 2 bodies. The other thing is the Crushers, even though they're brutes, they don't have the brute ability to do the ignore like wounds of 1 models for objectives and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, the allegiance stuff. That's through the choppers, right? No, that's a brute.
No, that's on the brute. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a brute war scroll rule, not.
Yeah.
Yes, and so you can't even bring that in for the Morgoth's Crushers.
Right. I mean,
the Iron Skulls with that 5-up ward save, I like as potentially a screen unit, because 1, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a battle line unit, which means you can't give away broken ranks. And then 2, the fact that it's got a 5-up ward just means that you got 2 wounds apiece. I don't remember how many models come in the unit, but it just makes them just that little bit more durable.
Yeah, I think there's 4 in the unit. So
okay, so it's potentially an 8-wound unit with a 5-up ward. So you probably could count it as 10. Yeah. Statistically, maybe a bit more, 10 or 11.
Yeah, I mean, because they're 5 points cheaper than a unit of 5 Ardboys. So you lose 2 wounds, but then you gain the extra ward save. So leaving them on a back objective or something like that, or to your point, to a screen. I think you have some options, for finding them in the army. I think they did a nice job with where they're at and their point costs and stuff like that. So.
And I'm also being told, don't forget Ripper Snarlfangs. Are they one of your choices? I know I can bring them into Gits.
You can ally the Gits in, so you could ally them in for sure. So
so I was in the Git show that I did not long ago. They're actually a really good choice. Like, they're cheap, they've got some good movement. It could be a great between them and even one of those warbands we were just talking about, like the Iron Skulls. They could be a really good example of being able to score things like Savage Spearhead, allow your primary Gore Grunters, more Crusher to kind of go up into the enemy, teleport one of those units into the backfield. The Ripper Snarlfangs run up the board. They're a very, very fast unit and cheap. No one's going to attack them. Boom, 2 battle tactics because you've scored that Savage Spearhead.
No, I've seen some lists recently that had them in it, like an Ironjawz list that had them in it. I started looking at them, and movement 12, 70 points, can do a few little things and got a couple.
And if someone kills them,
shots.
And if someone kills them, that's damage that's not going into the primary stuff that you want to stay alive, right? You're like, okay, cool, right. You kill 70 points, but if you ignore it, it's coming into your backfield. It's going to tag something. It's going to go, it's going to try to deny you things. It's a really good unit. I actually, when that got pointed out to me, because I didn't think about it in 2nd edition, I'm like, I don't need those things. In 3rd edition, I absolutely do need those things. And I'm like, that's actually a really good call.
No, I would agree. So,
couple of questions that I want to kind of bring us home with. Light Tactics had asked me, and I can't find where the question is, but I know what it was. And he was asking, what are your good and bad matchups for Ironjawz? There we go. Here it is. Do you have any good or bad matchups? So I imagine Stonehorn style Beast Claw Raiders could be an interesting mirror matchup.
Yes. Because most of them are going to have the 5-up ward save. All the Stonehorns do. They're only 12 damage, but if they're getting the charges, then you're dealing with impact hits, mortal wounds, the army itself, I had one guy that ignored mortal wounds or had a 5-up ward, and that was it. The whole rest of the army doesn't have anything. So anything heavy mortal wounds is going to hurt. I
dodged. They count to more on the objective too, which can make it a challenge for your type of game.
Yeah, luckily they're not the cheapest pointed army out there. So I played against, like I was saying, 2 Suns lists. So both of them had one had 4 megas, the other one had 3 megas, and a couple small guys. So like I knew in those ones, I took 2 Maw Crushers against 1 mega, and basically knew I had to take out a mega a turn. So if I didn't do that, then he's winning the game. So, but I think they had the damage output, the Ironjawz do, to be able to do that. So, I mean, that definitely helped. I played against a test game against, you're talking about like daughters, Marathi, Bow Snakes. He had a Gotrek, and it was the hero one. He took first turn, put both Marathi and the Shadow Queen and Gotrek on the 3 objectives, and I'm like, okay. And my whole thing is all multiple damage, like big damage, and we're chip. And
you don't have a lot of tools to do the chip damage because you don't have the shooting, you don't have the long range threats, and while you're really good at getting into, say, the Bow Snakes or even like the Lumineth Archers, you don't have the tools to handle the Foxes. You don't have the tools to handle Marathi and Gotrek because you just can't chip away, or you don't have a lot of single damage or single attack, high, like my Witch Elves would go into them, or, something with, lots of attacks, single attacks.
Yeah, no, I had 2 units of Gorgruntas with 21 attacks each, hit Gotrek, and he basically demolished both units and took like 4 wounds. You're like,
yeah, and then just and then heroic heal, like he's
then he healed, and then I'm like, okay,
he's a jerk.
That one's definitely a rough one. I haven't had to play against a KO list. I got lucky on that.
What about something like Nagash, or even our Lord of the Ever Chosen Archaon, or Archeon? Like, how are you finding those two?
I haven't had to go against Nagash himself. I've gone against Soulblight quite a few times, and been able to, bring the damage in order to remove everything. I mean, he's going to bring a lot of magic and stuff like that. You're just going to have to try to weather the storm a little bit with some of that.
And you're not relying on a lot of magic, like, your Hand of Gork, cool story, but things like, your War Chant beats can't be unbound. So it's not like, you come up against these supercasters and they're going to stop you from doing your thing.
I mean, you can always take the mount trait Weirdum, which gives you an extra buff against spells and stuff like that, which might be helpful if you knew you're going into like a heavy magic meta and stuff. Against Archeon, if they're bringing Archeon, they're not bringing a whole lot else on the table, So I think you kind of avoid Archeon, throw some pigs at them, and you let your Maw Crushers clean up everything else on the table. And then, come round 3 or 4, you say, okay, let's dance, and see what happens.
You kill the Vanguard, you kill the Vanguard, kill the War Shrine, kill Kairos, kill everything else, and just don't get into that fight, because the last thing you want to do is to have Slayer of Kings go off on the Maw Crusher and just auto delete you with those double 6s. But it's an interesting question, and I think another really good question that kind of come up was, would you consider something like the Fungoid Cave Shaman to get those extra CP as opposed to going for the Weird Knob? I guess obviously you trade off not having the big green Hand of Gork, but in its place you would get the extra CP generation and a cheaper hero.
Yeah, I mean, I ran him quite a bit when I was running Big Wa in 2nd edition. He was a great little add to add some extra bonus CPs and stuff like that. I think with the efficiency of being able to do 1 CP and being able to do things 3 times with the Maw Crushers, you rely a little bit less on having to have as many CPs. You are spending them quite a bit. My first 2 test games, I was blowing through CPs like crazy, and I'm like, whoa, I had to kind of dial it back and all right, let me rethink about.
You want to redeploy every 5 seconds. You want to rally at every chance you can. You want to unleash hell, but just to slow down. These resources need to last both of our turns.
Yeah, so at first you're like, wow, I got all these command points, and then you're like, okay, wait, I gotta manage this a little bit better and like think about what's going to happen on the bottom of the turn or the next turn, or different things like that, and the opponent's side of things. So, but no, I think that he's a great little ad. I definitely thought about adding him into this list because I had that kind of 90-ish points that kind of was like plugging and playing a few different things and just kind of settled in on the shaman at the what seemed to make the most sense. So
yeah, I mean, like as a Gits player, knowing being able to do Hand of Gork and being able to teleport can win or lose a game. And I think if you go the Fungoid Cave Shaman, you're not going to get access to the great big green Hand of Gork. So it's that trade-off, and I think I'd rather have the trade-off over the extra CP. I'd rather, I think personally. But the other kind of question that I wanted to ask, and kind of before we bring this home, is there a reason why you wouldn't want to play Ironjawz? I think the only thing that I can think of, I'll take the heat here, is the lack of model diversity. You lads with the KO and a few others, look, I'm fortunate. I come from Cities of Sigmar. I come from Gloomspite Gits. I come from these deep rosters of like 60 to 70 models, different unit choices. But the challenge is then finding and honing a list. Is like with Cities of Sigmar, like, right, I'm going to build Free Guild Guard, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to bring my Free Guild General, I'm going to bring Handgunners. Oh, well, Iron Drakes are better than Handgunners. Okay, well, then what synergizes with Iron Drakes? Going Hammers. And like, I just go down this rabbit hole of just trying to build a list. With you lot, it's simple. It's do I build around Maw Crushers, Piggies, Brutes, Ardboys, and I just bring in those synergies, and you all work together so well. And if I get bored, I can always bring in the Big War, play with some Bone Splitters, play with some Cruel Boys. So I think for me, that would probably be the thing, is that you got no shooting, your magic's not very good, and your options to have diverse lists are limited within pure Ironjawz.
No, I would agree with you. I mean, we talked about it. What was there? I think like 8 War Scrolls total for the army. So I mean, if you don't count the Underworld ones, those add a couple extra, but still, even with that,
10. Kragnos 11. Well done.
Right. But I think what they do well. Movement, damage, right? Movement and combat. They do it well. They do it efficiently.
It's clearly defined. I think that's probably one thing. Like some of my armies, they don't really have defined roles. It's like it's very clear. Like you look at this book and you understand what they do. You understand what you want to do. What's the play style? How am I going to get the most out of it? And even if I just put a whole bunch of toys on the table, I'm going to have a good time. I think that probably is one big thing, is that I've never had a bad game against Ironjawz. It's always been fair. There's never been really any shenanigans, and it's not like there's like I gotchas. It's just a fair punch up in the middle. Just sometimes you do it a little bit faster than I do.
Right. No, and I think if you're looking for something where you're having a bunch of like different little shenanigans and rules and, being able to do all that little chip damage and, doing a lot of those different things, then Ironjawz probably isn't for you, right? If you want to be able to be super active in every phase, we're not shooting. We have a couple shots from the Maw Crusher, 8-inch range. That's about it, right? So thinking about that, if you're trying to do heavy magic and you like to have all that stuff, we're not summoning. We're not, like all those extra little things we've kind of thrown out.
But you get the Big War. And I think that's the cool thing, is you got the Big War, so you can go into that if you need it. If you were going to modify your list at all and you were going to build more of a brute build, or you're going to kind of drop your piggies back a little bit, you didn't want to, because I think some people have looked at not your list personally, but I know when I've talked to some Ironjawz players, the double crusher is not the list for them. They want to run more brutes. They want to run more Ardboys. Is there any recommendations you'd kind of give to those people as we kind of bring this home?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would definitely start looking at Iron Suns first. I really like that one. I think I'd have like 3 units of 5 brutes in there, maybe taking one to reinforcing 1 to 10, having a couple units of pigs, having a Maw Crusher. I think the Mega Boss on foot, he got a new scroll. I think he's awesome for what he can do. I mean, he's only a 4-inch move, so I mean, he's going to get there eventually, but with what he's doing, I think he really got a nice buff in this new book.
And he got that rule that allows him to fight when he dies if he hasn't already fought. So
Right.
if he's already fought, you don't get to trigger it, but you can, you can go in there and fight with your brutes, fight with your Ard boys, and even if he's got 1 or 2 wounds left, know that you're going to be able to fight and do some serious damage on the way out.
Right. So, I think I'd look at something like that. Being able to do the counter charging, really being able to kind of react to your opponent doing stuff, I think is always huge. So
I was just looking at a rule with the Ard boys. Why have I got no? I think that's no. I was looking at my old deck that I wrote.
Oh.
And I remember there was one error that I built the Stormcast slides first, and then I built the Orc one because I'm more familiar with Stormcast than Orcs. And there was something on my Ard boys that I had 3-inch coherency. I'm like, why the hell does Ard boys have 3-inch coherency? No, it's because what I had there in the Stormcast was the little dragons, and they have a 3-inch coherency. I'm like, why do Ard boys have 3-inch coherency? When the hell did that happen? It doesn't. It's just me being an idiot, not looking after my templates.
That'd be great screen.
There's going to be a time where someone is going to have a screen that is going to have a 3-inch coherency, more like 40k. Like, it's going to come. Maybe it's like a Beast of Chaos or something. But
Stormcast have it with the other dudes that fly too.
That's what I was saying. Like
not the dragons, but not the dragons, but the other ones, the dudes with the wings, the prosecutors or whatever I think they're called.
This is not the Stormcast show. Don't.
Sorry.
I'm all green. I'm all like laser focused.
Great.
Look, I've really enjoyed this discussion, Donnie. I mean, we could talk for ages with Ironjawz, despite the limitations on the amount of war scrolls you've got, right? Because there is some interesting shenanigans. And I think if I was to summarize my experience and what I'm seeing in the local meta and even the global meta, I'm seeing Ironjawz are in a good spot. For 3rd edition, I think you're taking advantage of 3rd edition rules quite well, whether it's having, big heroes to use heroic actions. You've got the monsters be able to use the monstrous rampages. You've taken advantage of the board sizes being smaller, less bodies on the table. You've got more things to do. You have good options. I think, there's very little in this book that I felt were negative to you. And I know there's some changes like monstrous, destructive bulk and, some of the armor characteristics of the mega boss or more crusher, but I think you've won more than you've lost, and you're kind of seeing it already. I've seen a whole bunch of Ironjawz players in the top 10s in some of the big tournaments right now. So I would, and be it brute build, piggy build, more crusher build, maybe not Ard boy build.
Maybe
not Ard boy build. Don't put all your eggs in Ard boys. Like, bring them. Like, but just don't build around Ard boys as like the way you're gonna win.
Yeah, which is a big change from last edition to this edition with the book. I think a lot of people were doing more Ard boys just because they were that much more efficient than brutes, right? But now with brutes having the that new rule in there, and then the pigs doing what the pigs do, I think there's definitely some stuff there. But I think there's a lot of diversity in the list. I think you could do like a list that I did that we showed here. You could do a brute list. You could do even a heavier pig list. So I mean, there's lots of options with limited scrolls, which is but no, I think it's fun, and I think they're good in the meta because they can bring the damage. They got the movement. They can play the objective game a little bit, So I think it's a good spot there. So
I will say that I don't think Ard boys are down and out. Like, when I look at it, and there's a whole bunch of things still in Ard boys. Like, I wouldn't write them off completely, but I think it's definitely the brutes and piggies who are winning.
No,
I think the chat generally agrees. Donnie, if people want to chat to you, I do have your Twitter handle below. Is that the most active place you are on? If they want to kind of continue following your successes for the Gorka Morka?
Yeah, definitely. Try to get stuff posted in there. Also post stuff in like the WhatsApp and the Ironjawz group and stuff like that. So try to keep things active there as well. So.
No, that's awesome. And everyone knows in my Discord, I have a awesome Orruk Warclans build. I've got lots of people doing list science. So what I want to kind of end the show with, Donnie, is traditionally I asked people, how are they building their Ironjawz armies? Are they going double reinforcing their piggies? I'm yet to see someone go 9 piggies. I'm seeing lots of 6s and 3s. I'm not seeing a lot of 9s, and I wonder if 9s are too many. But I'd love to hear from the chat, whether you're watching this live or on replay. How are you building? Are you doing lots of piggies and you're going lots of 9s, and there's a lot of value in 9s to get CP efficiency? Are you using Kragnos or a Mega-gargant? Are you running lots of things like this? Or are you doing 1-drops in Battle Regiment? I think there's an interesting, Alpha Strike Battle Regiment build in this, where you just go 1-drop or 2 drops, and you just go in and go hard. But cool. All right, yeah. Donnie. Donnie's dog, before the show went live, Donnie's dog was off the charts. I think Donnie just got home, and your dog's been very well behaved, so make sure you give it a good belly scratch from me.
Will do. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, and just anything else I can answer, in the future, definitely let me know.
All right, Twitter handle below. Go chat. Go follow Donnie. He's a legend. All right, let's drop off. I'm going to have lunch. Have a good one. Thanks, Donnie. Right. Thanks again.
Have a good one.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more 6s.